In 2001, Atlas published the PlayStation 2 first-person dungeon-crawling RPG, Busen: Wizardry Alternative. 1 month later, it would hit the States under the name Wizardry: Tale of the Forsaken Land. Some indeterminate number of years later, a teenage Cody would grab the game from a bargain bin at a GameStop, dusty and unloved, with one of those stickers on the box. You know the ones that leave the film and then you can't really get rid of the film and it makes you feel like the whole thing's dirty. Maybe this is me. Don't worry about it, because about 10 hours later, I discovered that apparently my PlayStation no longer enjoyed the flavor of blue-backed discs. It's kind of weird because I caught myself daydreaming about how good this game is in the genre, and I've never finished. So before I start thinking back fondly on this really good dungeon crawler, it would help if I knew if it was a really good dungeon crawler. So I played through it, and if you're not into waiting, I did like it. There's some weird hiccups, but I did like it. The developer of this title, Rakjin, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, is one of those companies who ended up doing almost next to no press for a lot of the games they make, and if they do, it's not in English. However, if we look at their webpage, we will see a couple great clues. Happily? Interesting? Seriously? Fresh? Okay. There's content out there. I definitely can't get to it because of a language barrier, which is cool if you're the kind of company that does contracts for other larger companies and you want to be out of the limelight, but it is a horrible pain if you're someone trying to talk about them in a YouTube video. The most notable information I could find about the studio was that at one point, they were called Rakdime, I hope I'm saying that right, but Japanese audiences found that too hard to pronounce, so they changed the name to Rakjin, which I hope the people of Japan are saying more easily because I'm like 60% sure I'm saying both of them wrong. I can tell you a large number of staff that worked on Tale of the Forsaken Land also worked on Sub-Rebellion, another Rakjin game with room for an obvious sequel which we could call Dom Rebellion. A lot of their work tends to be licensed games and ports, lots of Naruto, Bleach, etc. They have some original titles that they've snuck in over the years. I, for one, really enjoyed their fighting game Kabuki Clash East of Eden, but I think the real star of their catalog are the Snowboard Kids games on the Nintendo 64. Most recently, it seems like they've self-published a game called The Cake, which had a timeline of leaving early access within a year, and that was more than a year ago, so I don't have high hopes, necessarily, but it also it could be a masterpiece. Reviews for Tale of the Forsaken Land were a bit of a mixed bag at the time of its release. Even in 2001, when this game came out, first-person dungeon crawlers were considered a bit passé. The genre had a bit of a reputation as being for PC gamers, those guys who like to crunch stats and not jump over bullet. Of course, something a lot of the reviews were quick to mention was the fact that Final Fantasy X dropped the same year, setting a benchmark for what a console RPG could look like. Given that, a dungeon crawler, and more specifically one on this budget, couldn't hope to compete in terms of cinematics, but I would also argue that that's probably not what this was going for. But it's still a very hard sell if you're into the more bombastic ends of the genre. Of all the reviews I could find though, GameSpot's review was definitely the most positive, saying, quote, "Wizardry Tale of the Forsaken Land is easily one of the best PC-style role-playing games to ever grace a console. Surtech and Atlas fans alike will definitely want to see this interesting take on the series, and those raised on console-style RPGs could find themselves enjoying a different style of gameplay if they give themselves the chance." On the other end of that, a Game Informer wrote my favorite critical review, awarding the game a 6.5 out of 10, saying, "Instead of clouding the screen with such high-tech innovations as animation and CG cutscenes, Wizardry counters with still frame images and plenty of text. Why show the gamer what happened within the story when they can imagine it? As horrendous as this game may appear to be, I actually found myself somewhat engrossed." This review is exceptionally insane because you can see the Stockholm Syndrome setting in on the reviewer. Recently, I was in an international supermarket and I bought a bag of garlic butter steak Doritos because, wow, what a silly flavor. And the chips tasted a little like beef bouillon had been mixed with what I can describe as a darkness, a void where joy is absent. But somehow, while playing video games and only half paying attention, I did manage to eat the entire bag while simultaneously not enjoying it. I guess that's this guy's experience? That being said, Metacritic plopped the game around a 7 out of 10, which is right around where I imagine something as decidedly anachronistic as a wizardry game would probably end up sitting. Anecdotally, I can't find the game in a lot of online discussions, but when it does come up, it's generally spoken of kindly. Even Famitsu, the Japanese gaming magazine, wrote a 20-year retrospective for the series, which actually laments the inability to play the game in its Japan-only sequel on modern hardware, so I know for a fact at least me and one guy at Famitsu care about this game. In terms of actual gameplay, Tale of the Forsaken Land falls into 3 categories: resting in town, exploring the dungeon, and probably the thing you'll be doing the most, fighting. Combat in this game is pretty over the plate if you know any turn-based RPG. You select your moves, and you and the enemy proceed to damage one another until someone dies. The stakes are high though. The death of a character in a wizardry game means the risk of losing them permanently. So for the most part, you're going to be swinging equipped weapons, casting spells, or using items. However, we are going to get a little bit of a twist to traditional turn-based combat with the addition of allied arts. Each character on your team will have a bond stat representing how they feel about you and the rest of the team. The higher it is, the more allied actions you are going to have access to. Some of these are very basic. They'll do things like let your front row skip a turn to greatly increase your defensive rating, or a rush move that makes your party attack as 1 to damage all foes. These will get more advanced as you get further in the game. They span the space between confusingly niche and absolutely indispensable. Take the spell cancel art, for example. It lets you stop the first enemy spell of a turn, provided 2 back row members sacrifice their actions to wait and react. Mastering allied arts is key to making a lot of the harder boss encounters much easier, and thankfully it's not hard to suss out which ones are actually beneficial. Meanwhile, exploration is a game of managing your resources. Combat will wear down your party as you trek into the dungeon's dark depths. You'll need to be mindful of the items you bring with you. Characters in this game have a limited inventory space, and you're often left to choose between having more weapons and armor or having more space for loot and items to heal. The strain on your team is alleviated, however, by a generous number of unlockable shortcuts. Pretty soon you're going to start skipping floors that waste your time and resources and make your limited health and magic reserves go further. Because when you invest in a shortcut, you invest in yourself. I've spoken about this before in other videos, but there's a primal core in my brain that you will unlock if you give me a shortcut to make my adventure more streamlined. I see the irony of the developer both creating and solving the problem for me, but there's an itch that it scratches that I can't quite speak to. When it's done right, it doesn't feel predatory, it just feels like a good way to recontextualize your journey that you've been taking over and over. Beyond shortcuts, there's treasure. And while where a treasure chest shows up can be random, there are a few set locations for important treasures. Although, no matter where you find your treasure, if there's something good inside, you're probably gonna have to disarm a trap. Now, disarming a chest just means pressing the buttons displayed on the screen in order, so it's kinda just a quick time event, but I caught myself enjoying the change of pace. And I'm not crazy, I'm crazy, but I'm not crazy on this account because they added in an entire mini game of it. Like unlocking that chest, well, now do it 50 times in a row, without failing. Does it wear out its welcome very quick? Yes, but the rewards are quite good. The biggest opponent you face, by my measure, in terms of exploration though, is going to be that really zoomed in mini-map in the corner. You can't access the map to see the floor layout without using magic or enchanted items. I'm on the fence about this mechanically. On one hand, it keeps the stakes of exploration high. You're often weighing the use of a valuable spell slot or inventory space to have the convenience of a map in front of you. On the other hand, I have a soggy old brain and it got turned around a lot. There are a few times I caught myself spamming the spell because I would lose my bearings entirely when I was whisked away to the combat screen. So while it's immersive, to be sure, I did find myself getting annoyed on occasion, especially with some of the more puzzle-centric floors. While exploring the dungeon, you'll also find the Reaper. This little rascal loves to pop out of space-time and chase you around. If he manages to catch up to you while you're exploring, he will cause a random member of your team to receive a curse. Normally, reviving a fallen comrade carries a small risk of permadeath. But for a cursed character, that failure rate jumps to a guaranteed 100%. The trade-off for this massive risk is utility. A cursed party member can see Reaper doors, secret doors that'll lead you to treasure. If you're standing somewhere and your controller is vibrating, baby, that's a Reaper door. Go get cursed. And if you're feeling real frisky, you can curse your whole party in order to unlock Reaper arts, the evil cousin to allied arts. Personally, I didn't mess with these much. The novelty of new moves didn't quite outweigh the danger of having a member of my party die permanently. The core loop of Tale of the Forsaken Land is about pushing your luck. You'll fight and explore, burning through resources until you dare not go any further. At this point, you need to limp back to town. The game really strongly incentivizes those retreats because you can't actually level up until you've rested at the inn. This means the game is actively nudging you not to push too hard. Well, that and the ever-looming threat of losing a character permanently. Now, the town ostensibly is just a glorified menu, but I did find warping around to each little diorama building to be very charming. Even though if you think about it for a bit, you realize the scale of your character is enormous, gauging by how high your field of view remains as you approach a building, but don't worry about that. Each of the buildings you can go to have a very strong use case. I already mentioned the inn. That's where you'll be getting a room for the night and you'll be healing your members back to full, and if they have enough experience, level them up. Then there's the tavern, where you accept quests. The quest system in this game is very bare bones, but at the tavern some adventurers will put in requests, asking you to fulfill them for a reward. Typically, they're like finding something or killing a thing, but they often produce interesting world building or new party members you can recruit. I also really appreciate the warm atmosphere and glow of the bar, in contrast to the snowy exterior and dangerous dungeons. There's also the save Stonehenge thing. I don't know why this pile of rocks is a save point, but if I start questioning save point logic in video games, we're gonna be here forever. There's the temple, where you can have services like healing status ailments and, most vitally, resurrecting an ally. Revival is spooky because it carries a level of risk. Reanimating a fallen teammate can fail. The odds of failure are even higher if you do it yourself in dungeon. And while the town's success rate is higher, it is not infallible either. The first time you fail to resurrect a hero, they will turn to ash, but should you fail to resurrect that ash, you will lose that character permanently. Now, obviously this is frightening, but there is a save point in town, so I mean, honestly, you can save scum through this process if you want. It doesn't feel good like you feel like you're cheating, but you can do it. I did it. It's a lot like Fire Emblem, where I enable permadeath, but then I will restart the entire battle if one of my characters dies. You know, looking inward, maybe I just like the idea of stakes more than actually dealing with them. Huh. Then, of course, there's the weapon shop, which is owned by this guy. And the weapon shop is great because the owner can identify items you find in the dungeon, and he will pay top dollar for a cursed item, assuming you didn't equip it. And if you were dumb enough to equip it, then he'll charge you to remove it. And did I get a little excited and equip things I found in the dungeon? Yeah, maybe. Sadly, outside of what you sell him, he doesn't ever get any new stock on his own. I think spiritual successors like Etrian Odyssey really solve for this with the whole unlocking new stuff by selling used monster parts. But I will say, not having a weapon shop where you could upgrade your gear in a reliable way was a little bit disappointing. Thankfully, the store also serves a second function. The owner's wife can merge 2 or more monster drops, i.e. slime gel or bones, into spell stones. These stones are used to teach or upgrade spells. Leveling a spell is essential to helping your character deal with stronger monsters in the depths. Very obviously, level 2 fire is stronger than level 1. And since the store has little in the way of new weapons, you're not really tempted to sell these parts for money. And I don't know, this is a small thing, but I really kind of liked how the wife of the owner takes the counter. I just thought that was a neat little touch. Tale of the Forsaken Land lists 4 people under BGM and SE composer credits, and that's not including the addition of the sung song at the end, credited to Yumiko Nishio and Tomohiko Sato. So why are 4 people listed for sound? I would guess it's because there's a lot of attention given to sound effects. Swords and weapons can swing with a weighty, satisfying crunch, monsters get bespoke noises, and footsteps ring out in hallways. In this way, most of the music is in service of setting a mood versus being active in your mind as a song that's playing. For example, the prison is all rattling chains and creaking gates. The graveyard is the sound of churning earth as the dead no longer sit still, clawing up to the surface. This all mixes in with the footsteps of you and your enemies to create a very ominous soundscape. The music's there just to add that extra little bit of sinister energy. So, bearing that in mind, the soundtrack itself is pretty limited for a 40 to 50 hour game. it really feels like less attention was given to the melodic tracks featured in the game. I found myself enjoying the of-the-era synth work on some of these songs, but a lot of them repeat really quickly. There's going to be several tracks that get a lot of plays, some wearing out their welcome more than others. Mercifully, the battle theme changes multiple times as you get deeper into the labyrinth, so you don't have to hear that as much as you'd think. While some of the music tended to slide off my brain a few hours after I closed out the game, I would like to give special attention to the absolute pure moods compilation energy that radiates off of the guild theme. There's also a complete dearth of voice acting, and I'll be honest, that's perfectly fine. I suspect some of the lines being voiced at this game's budget might have led to some rather memorable line reads, and not for the right reasons.
No, this isn't happening! There's no reason for me to go on. What? What am I fighting for?
And while I live for this level of camp, I don't think it would have helped the tone the game was shooting for. It's also worth mentioning they made the executive decision for some reason to have monsters scream. Now, sometimes you're going to want to plan out your move a little bit more, and when you do, the monsters are going to sit there just doing their idle animation. However, as a cursed side effect of this, if there is more than one screaming monster in the enemy party, that means you get moments where they just take turns screaming over one another. If you aren't familiar with the art of Katsuya Terada, then you're missing out. I would argue that Mr. Terada's art is one of the major reasons this game succeeds in creating the atmosphere that it was looking to set up. In an absolutely unshocking twist, he's cited Mobius as an influence, and that's 2 videos in a row I've found an artist who liked Mobius. Actually, you know what? Maybe it's me. Maybe I just like a certain kind of art. My favorite piece in his portfolio of game artwork, though, has to be the Super Famicom cover for Prince of Persia. I just want to state that he absolutely crushed the North American box art. And not since Ico, I think, have I seen a US box art get shamed so savagely. Early in his career, he worked for Nintendo Power. He did a series of gorgeous fantasy art for the NES Zelda. Interestingly, he illustrated all of his stuff without having played the game himself. Apparently, he just pulled his inspiration from reading about the game. And I can't argue with the results. This then probably explains why he was chosen to be the artist for Wizardry: Tale of the Forsaken Land. The character designs are somewhat understated. No one character is peacocking in the way that a lot of early 2000s character designs were wont to do. To be fair, I like over-the-top anime designs, but the grounded, dirty characters that inhabit this world fit really well. Duhan is a cursed town sitting on top of a haunted labyrinth. It's not the place where you go for a pleasant day. Terada, it should also be noted, is an equal opportunity midriff and thigh window giver. Men have ab windows, women show abs, and it's confusing. I'm not an expert, but if you're gonna do deadly battle in an abyss, I'd vote wearing more armor. Cover up that little tum-tum, it's all full of delicate organs. Then again, the orcs have midriffs, so it might just be this is an agreed upon truce not to stab each other there. This is where I will also make the special awkward call out to the thief Rui, who might be one of the early examples of me having a crush on a PNG. I guess I was into women with little fancy hats and dislocated shoulders. Look, I'm not 100% sure why I decided to share that, but I need you to take this secret to your grave. Tale of the Forsaken Land opens by explaining the history of the Kingdom of Duhan. Once a proud and prosperous kingdom, the whole of the castle and the surrounding city were engulfed in a huge, blinding light. Once that light faded, the Kingdom of Duhan was no more. The flash not only destroyed the castle, but left in its place a twisted labyrinth that descended deep into the earth. On the surface, an eternal winter covers the town. This place is a bit of a bummer. Although calling what's left of Duhan a town also might be a bit of an overstatement. Only a scant few buildings are left. The remaining establishments are built around supporting an economy of adventurers who brave the labyrinth's depths, seeing what they can find at the core. Maybe that's fame, power, some kind of treasure, or something else. It's here in the wintry outskirts of Duhan that our hero will enter the story, but in order to do that, we'll need to create them. Much like its influence D&D, wizardry games will have you roll a character and allocate their stats. You pick a race, class, and alignment for your hero. You can choose elf, dwarf, gnome, or hobbit as your race. For classes, you can choose from warrior, priest, or sorcerer to begin. However, later you're going to get more classes to choose from, for example, samurai, bishop, or knight. In my case, I chose the unseasoned spaghetti noodle of the fantasy world, the human warrior, whose alignment was good. Bland. Once you have your hero made, you'll meet a silver-haired swordsman at the edge of town. With an air about him I would be tempted to describe as dying? He explains to us that his god sent him here, and that he was told he would find the person destined to save Duhan from its cursed fate. Oh, it's us, the amnesiac. Not who I would pick, but who are we to question divine providence? And the answer to that isn't rhetorical, by the way. Your main character is absolutely silent and will question nothing throughout this story. However, even if God wants us to do this, we're probably going to need a little bit of help. The swordsman takes us to the local tavern to recruit our first two allies, both of whom are struggling to rebuild trust after they each suffered a traumatic event in the dungeon. First is Ricardo, a warrior who was treated solely as a tool by his former party, and it's eroding his faith in teamwork. Then there's Kyo, a ninja trained to be fearless in the face of death, who found himself actually quite afraid when he suffered a near-mortal wound in the dungeon and realized maybe he's not so cool with dying. Helping both of these adventurers face their fears comes in the form of quests that you'll need to take on, and it doesn't seem like there's any therapy in Duhan, so you're as good as it gets. Now, if you're familiar with classic wizardry, you know that having pre-made characters with actual names isn't the norm. Typically, you roll your entire party like you did your hero at the start. This game does allow you to hire handmade party members, but it forces you to adventure with Ricardo and Kyo a bit before the guild's features to do so unlock. You'll quickly find that Duhan has many of these named NPCs that you can recruit, 14 in total if you include Kyo and Ricardo. For what it's worth, I actually ended up using a party of entirely story-made characters. It might be out of the spirit of wizardry a bit, and I had less control over things like their initial stats, but I enjoyed the extra immersion. It felt better having a team with an actual connection to the story, even if that connection gets a little tenuous at times. Pre-made characters will chime in and add to the experience. If you go with a fully player-created party, you're left with a team of 6 who silently stare into the middle distance while the story unfolds in front of them. And yes, I think that does make me a wizardry poser, and no, I don't know what to do with that information. And with the help of Ricardo and Kyo, we start making our way through the first floor, the ruined fortress. I'm not sure exactly how much time has passed since the Flash engulfed Duhan, but it's clearly been a while. Much of the castle has collapsed, letting snow drift in from outside. Ruins crumble around you. Between that and the isolation, the whole place just feels long lost. B1 isn't very challenging, but the game does start you out with only half the members you need for a full party. So there's a little bit of an artificial challenge to it. As you push deeper, you'll help both Ricardo and Kyo deal with their past traumas, eventually stepping up as their leader. Turns out you're exceptionally cheaper and better than therapy. I really liked this though. Even though our hero is silent and doesn't have a lot of agency in the story, it still establishes that these characters have a reason to trust us. Our hero is a natural leader and others can sense this. We'll find out that access to the second floor is forbidden without a pass from the Royal Guard. And that's where we'll meet Sarah waiting to find one of those passes, but oddly the entirety of the Royal Guard is out at the moment, so we just have to stick to exploring floor 1, which is fine because there's lots of it. Eventually, we'll find the silver-haired swordsman deeper in B1. He's revealed to be a knight who once served in the Queen's Guard, an elite unit of soldiers who were tasked with protecting Queen Otelier's life. Their secret to this was their mastery of allied arts. His plan is to teach you this before he finally just dies. I mean, look at him, it's gotta be soon, right? Thankfully, the perfect time to test allied arts arrives in the form of the sorceress Virgo. You've heard rumors about her at this point. She's an evil and grouchy sorceress who sometimes attacks adventurers on sight. It really just depends on her mood when you bump into her. Apparently her power is enough that she can cow monsters into following her orders, and since she hates people, this works out great. She can adventure with powerful monsters and forgo any stupid, smelly humans. This isn't really much more than a tutorial battle though, and once you beat Virgo, she storms off in a huff, leaving the sickly swordsman satisfied. Proud that he could pass on his techniques, he finally follows through on his whole dying thing he seemed so into and fades away. Like literally fades away. Just to be clear, he doesn't just, I'm not saying his sprite disappears, he just fades out of existence. His final act was giving us the tools to explore the dungeon more effectively, which is great news because for some reason all of the Royal Guard is back. When you return to their quarters, you meet the Queen and her court wizard, Leydua. Queen Hotelier is aloof and distant, while Leydua is standoffish and protective, doing almost all the talking for her. It feels very off, but I can probably chalk some of that up to the stress of standing in the decrepit ruins of your very own castle. The Royal Guard is spread thin dealing with entities deeper in, so they offer you a deal. You get a license to explore the ruins if you help with their survey and support their troops when possible. With the license in hand, it's time for real dungeon delving. I'm talking get ready to delve it up. Like, the introduction is over. The journey to the labyrinth and its heart starts in earnest. So now's a good time to warn you, I'm going to spoil the rest of the story of this game. And to be honest, I don't think you play a wizardry game for just the story. The focus is more on the monsters and the dungeon and the atmosphere, but when story shows up, it is intriguing. It makes for a nice carrot on a stick. So if you'd rather experience this game for yourself, feel free to skip to the timestamp on the screen or use any of the chapter markers I provide in the description. But for everyone else, all you cool people, the time for clicking is over because we are entering the spoiler zone. You'll spend a lot of time, at the very least, passing through the first floor, the ruined fortress, as a good number of shortcuts are going to lead back here. It's also where the game allows itself the most levity. You'll find two different characters, both with get-rich-quick schemes milling about this level. One eventually opens up the Monster Parts shop, which is the most helpful store in the game, and the other is Helga. And yeah, she gives you a good item at the end of her questline, but she says "Kawinky Dink" at one point, which did a weird amount of psychic damage to me. I don't know what that's about. But now that we have the pass, we're gonna head down to floor 2, which starts to introduce you to a lot of your fellow adventurers. Some, like Rui and Daniel, are part of quest lines at the tavern and give you the option to recruit them if you help them out. Others are there to be mysterious and not share their name, like this waifish, withering elven woman with world-weary wisdom who kind of speaks in platitudes about darkness. And there's Eugene, whom you come upon after he's failed to resurrect his allies. He's watching their ashes sorta blow away in the breeze. Then he kinda talks about how you need evil to stop evil in a weird, distracted manner. Nothing to worry about with this guy. The rest of the adventurers you meet fall into the category of hot tips or hot gossip. For example, folks are saying the Queen is an imposter. Despite the fact that she was once famous for her absolute kindness, Queen Atelier is now oddly cold and distant. It feels like a different person. She's ignoring her responsibilities as royalty, leaving those to Leydua, and both of them seem much more focused in going deeper into the dungeon rather than worrying about any of the royal subjects who are still alive in the town. It's not all chat though. The prison is also home to the first real boss you'll fight. Just know that this game really rarely enjoys the idea of signposting a big battle. You know how normally you sense a boss is coming because, hey, that's a conspicuous big room, or, well, that was a pretty obvious save point? Tale of the Forsaken Land has zero interest in that. In the case of floor 2, a Reaper literally flies out from below and ambushes you. One minute you're happy because, hey, I opened up a new path, and the next, an unusually fit skeleton shows up to wail on you nerds. Past the prison is floor 3, the first labyrinth level. These are randomly generated, and I think they add a nice bit of variety to the dungeon crawl, but there isn't much to say with them in terms of story. Some have little events, but none of them really pertain largely to the story at hand. You usually just kind of kill stuff, find loot, and move on to the next floor. And the floors that aren't random are going to start becoming twisting mazes in a much more aggressive way. Floor 4 and beyond, the game will be happy to lead you in circles if you're not paying attention to where you're going. It achieves this using a lot of very cursed things like pitfalls or portals. This is of course by design. You're supposed to kind of poke at the floors until you understand the critical path forward. And B4 is the graveyard, a skyless and yet somehow outdoor space crawling with the undead. Notably on this floor, we're going to meet Colgan, captain of the Queen's ninja unit. He's at the very exit to floor 5. Why she has a team made up exclusively of ninjas is a really good question, but we don't have time for pleasantries because Colgan will attack on sight. You'll notice this as you progress through the dungeon. A number of NPCs seem to know you already. Whatever you did prior to your amnesia seems to have made a decent number of them have very strong feelings toward you. They will also have an excuse as to why they're too busy to explain how they know you. Once you defeat him and some of his ninjas, he's in a big rush though, so of course he doesn't have the time to explain anything to you and retreats further into the dungeon. The game leans a little heavily on your protagonist's silence for this. I would like to think that your character would speak up and say something on the matter, but in the case of Tale of the Forsaken Land, that's just not going to happen. They're going to yell at you about being a jerk, and then I assume you'll just stare into the middle distance. Following Colgan deeper into the dungeon, we'll reach the waterfall. The more keen among you have probably noticed the floors are not making a lot of logical sense. Digging deeper into the earth, you typically aren't going to hit graveyards or waterfalls. You'll discover all these places were actually consumed in the Flash and have all been stitched back together in some sort of weird reflection of the original. In the case of the waterfall especially, this is the Elven homeland which was engulfed in the Flash. It's here that we'll bump into Eugene again, the off-puttingly sinister fellow from the prison. At his command now is an entire army of monsters and evil mercenaries. Odd, I don't recall him having all of that 3 floors ago. Eugene's using this army to wage his war against the Queen. Her preoccupation with the dungeon means her focus isn't on restoring the lives of the people of Duhan, and he's chosen to work with these monsters in order to overthrow the royal family. Afterward, he hopes to use this to restore the kingdom to its former glory. Oh, okay. Working with evil to get just ends. I've seen enough media to get a feel for where this goes, but I'll hear him out. Despite the whole army of monsters bit, he's quite polite to you as he continues to march deeper into the dungeon. He has no quarrel with you and tells his men to stand down. So if nothing else, he's still noble. Also in the waterfall is our beloved mean sorceress Virgo, who's still grouchy about your fight from the beginning of the game, so jot that down. This time she attacks with bigger, meaner, somehow cuter monsters. Anytime you bump into her from here on out, she will want a rematch with you. And finally, we'll meet the waifish withering elven woman with world-weary wisdom, who explains that her name is Michelle, which is a lot easier to say. But then again, I was the one who wrote this and stumbled on it a million times, so I'm not really sure who we blame for this. It's me. It's my fault. We blame me. Being an elf, she recognizes this place as the homeland she grew up in. But something's wrong. Clue number 1, of course, being that the waterfall wasn't 5 floors deep in a catacomb, but more than that, her people's magic had an intangible song in the air. Only those who are magically attuned could hear, and to her ears, this place has a deafening silence. Michelle also drops one of the first bigger story beats on us. It's explained that we were friends with, maybe in a romantic relationship. We'll say we were unclear in nature with an elf from her village named Sophia. Sophia was the head priestess of the Queen's Guard, but perished in the Flash. It's also vaguely hinted at that we might have had something to do with her demise. Normally, something like this would be cause for concern. You might start asking things like, maybe I'm a bad person, or at the very least, was I at one time a bad person? But you needn't dwell on that for very long, because at the bottom of the waterfall, you're visited by a ghostly memory of Sophia, who talks about precious memories made with you and bears you no ill will. Michelle witnesses this event as well and takes it as a sign. At this point, Michelle can join our party if we'd like, and she also decides to drop a bombshell on us. The Flash is a spell. It turns out there's a forbidden elven ritual that is capable of creating something like the Flash, so it's entirely possible this ritual was stolen from her people, or used by an ill-meaning faction of them. A lot of characters to this point have been suggesting that this was a divine retribution from God himself. This kind of turns it on its head. That is the end of the waterfall and the halfway point for the dungeon. Of the 5 remaining floors, 2 of them are labyrinths, so there's going to be a lot of story crammed into the next 3. B6 is the Moldy Fort, a place where the Queen's forces and Eugene's monster army are now fully clashing with one another. It seems like Eugene is actually succeeding in his plan to make good on waging war, and it appears as though he's winning. His forces have kidnapped the Queen and everyone is scrambling to try and get her back. Areas on this floor are either filled with battle between the 2 armies or eerily quiet. but the whole thing has a real damp vibe, but I guess it's called the Moldy Fort, so yeah. As we work our way through some of the more complicated parts of the dungeon, we'll eventually find our way to an incubus who is holding the queen hostage. He has trapped her inside of a spell that does not allow her to awaken as he feeds off the energy of her nightmares. If you're familiar with incubuses in folklore, then you'll know they're also famous for, other stuff. His dialogue implies you got here just in time to save her from whatever he was about to do. The incubus explains that the queen was a gift to him from Eugene in exchange for some of the dark power that feeds Eugene's army. However, you don't really have time to process that because seeing the monster hold the queen's unconscious body within his spell spurs you to jump into action. Something deep inside you compels you to rescue her from this monstrosity. Okay, Atlas, let's tone it down just a hair. Once you dispatch this ick-fest of a horseman, the queen will regain consciousness and begin to just mumble to herself about how she definitely is the queen, almost convincing herself. Before we have any time to pry at this though, Colgan and Leidua of the Queen's Guard arrive to escort her to safety. The queen continues to act very strange, almost like a child. However, Leidua seems to be able to snap her somewhat back to her senses. You're given some flashbacks to your past. Although you don't remember who you were or what you did, at some point you had spoken to the queen, or at least you contain the memories of someone who has. But regardless of all this, she doesn't really seem to know who you are, nor does Leidua. Only Colgan seems to remember you, and let me check in, yes, he still hates us. Okay, past the Moldy Fort and subsequent labyrinth floor, we'll at last reach the Sham Sanctuary. It seems this place at one point was a temple for some sort of purpose. There's hieroglyphs, altars, mysterious crystals. It's really got the whole package. The second you walk through the stairwell into this level though, you're thrown into chaos. It seems Leidua has betrayed Colgan. All of the ninjas under the Queen's command are now attacking their former leader. Leidua seems to disapprove of Colgan going into the deeper floors of the dungeon. We haven't seen much of his power at this point, but it seems as though Leidua's specialty as a caster is homunculus magic. He decides to prove this by summoning a massive golem to finish you both off and teleporting away. Now we have to discover exactly what secret Leidua thought was worth killing his own allies for. Colgan doesn't forgive you, but he decides to put off fighting you until he can find out exactly what's going on. And that checks out. I'm not summoning a guy made out of used body parts to kill us both. Thankfully, spread throughout the Sham Sanctuary are 3 crystals, each with the power to reveal memories to whomever touches them. Oh, we lost our memory. Well, that's gonna be handy. I guess you dungeon delve at the exact same speed as Colgan because he's going to be at each location when you arrive. Grumpy, but present. Touching each one pulls you and Colgan into a sea of memories and fills in all the context that the story's been lacking so far. This whole entire segment is just kind of characters and dialogue, much like a visual novel. And let's keep things really easy by just compiling it all into one long story. Several generations ago, a high-ranking bishop decided that his god was imperfect. Death, it seems, was too cruel an end to his mind. What sort of god would allow a follower that worshipped him to die? He decided, instead, to create a new god that would free people of the fate of death. In order to achieve this, he needed a ritual sacrifice, and in this case, he chose his granddaughter. But the Queen of Duhan at the time, Oriana, found out about this plot and stopped the bishop, using a holy sword to defeat him. However, despite his mortal body dying, the spirit of the bishop survived, given an undying soul as a gift from the dark entity whom he tried to summon. Many decades later, we flash forward to our hero as an orphan living on the street. It's here that the spirit of the bishop finds us, posing as a kindly stranger, and takes us in. He lets us know that the death of our family lies at the fault of the Queen Hotelier, who did nothing while famine swept through her kingdom. Of course, now that we have someone to blame, he tells us that he can help us get the revenge that we so desire, and so we spend our entire childhood training to be an assassin whose sole purpose is to kill the queen. This end, we infiltrate the Queen's Guard in order to get close enough to her. However, while undercover, you meet 2 people who rattle all of your beliefs up to that point. The first is Sophia, a priestess in the Queen's Guard who you develop, as I mentioned, a maybe romantic relationship with, but you're able to open up to her in a way that you've never been before. The second and bigger hurdle is that the Queen herself is clearly a selfless and wonderful person, willing to do anything for her subjects. It's clear that the famine was out of her control, and she still does everything in her power to atone for it to this day. While some of the other members of the Queen's Guard don't trust you, her trust in you is absolute, to the point where she even presents you with the holy sword her ancestors used to stop the bishop many generations ago. In the final memory crystal, we see how all of this shakes out. The bishop realizes he's lost you to the human connection you've experienced with Sophia and Queen Hotelier, so he kidnaps Sophia, offering you a bargain: her life for the Queen's. Refusing his demands, you go to confront the bishop yourself. What you didn't expect was that Hotelier has gone with you to lend support. Together, with the Queen's magic and your swordplay, you battle the bishop. However, Colgan and his troops arrive on the scene and mistake you for being a part of the kidnapping. This, however, allows the bishop to get close enough to the Queen to use her as a catalyst to complete the ritual, enveloping the entire area in a blinding white light. In your last bit of strength, you throw your sword at him as the white light tears everything to pieces. This, of course, is the flash that destroyed your kingdom, and this also roughly catches us up to where we are now. Colgan, having seen these memories with you, realizes that you weren't a bad guy, that you didn't kill the Queen, and that he's been yelling at you a lot for no reason. So now we have a new party member. Yay, welcome aboard. Colgan, you could have just asked us. We could have just told you we were nice. Once past the lore dump crystals, we eventually cross paths again with Sir Eugene. He's seen the crystals too, and he's different now. In order to command his army of monsters, he made a deal with a demon, which has been slowly gaining more control over his physical form. Just being near him makes you taste blood in the air. To drive home the evil vibe, he's accompanied by these two BDSM-looking demons, which one must imagine is the universal symbol for, I have made a contract with darkness. As a young teen, I went to go see the band Soulfly perform live. I remember among the crowd was a man, likely in his late 30s, with no shirt and 2 pierced nipples. He had chosen to hang a glow stick from each of them and shake them about vigorously. I remember walking by him and imagining that couldn't be comfortable, but I also remember being intimidated. Perhaps it had something to do with the fact that everything intimidated me at the age of 15, but maybe he too had made a bargain with darkness. It's one of those details that when your mom picks you up from the Soulfly show and says, "Oh honey, how was it?" and you go, it was fine, and you just leave it there. Eugene reveals that the Queen currently with Ledua is another homunculus of his creation. This is a fake to keep the public from panicking. The real one died in the flash with the bishop. He believes, however, the real Queen's soul is still preserved at the very bottom of the dungeon. Eugene heads down to floor 9 to confront whatever's down there himself, and we follow after shortly. And floor 9 is terrible. It's just a tangle of portals. It's a rat's nest of portals that all loop around, and I have kind of a tiny little dyslexic brain, and I looked up a map and that didn't do it. I actually had to map it out. You can see here me trying my best. But once you're past that maze of portals, the rest of the dungeon is pretty much a straight line right to the final boss. And during that straight line, we're going to bump into Virgo one last time, who's standing in front of a skeleton. I guess Eugene was killed and his soul taken by whatever demon he made a contract with. Virgo, for what it's worth, isn't in the mood to punch us in the face. She's currently suffering from an existential crisis. It seems that the ghost of the bishop is also wandering around this floor, and he bumped into her, explaining everything. It seems that everyone in Duhan is dead. Not dying in the dungeon or going to die, everyone here is already gone. The Flash has consumed Duhan. We're basically here in limbo. Every person you've met wandering the streets is just a soul waiting to be harvested by the bishop's dark god, who is named Bushin. After the Flash, we've already lost. Virgo decides to go back up to floor 5 and relieve some stress by punching an orc. If you want, you can follow her and recruit her at this point. The bishop's eternal life that he wanted from his god did happen, but it's a bit of a monkey's paw. Sure, you can't die, but that's at the cost of becoming part of Bushin's hive mind soul. When you finally find and confront the bishop yourself, he confirms everything that Virgo said to be true. Duhan has been the most literal ghost town of all time. The only reason everyone hasn't been consumed yet is when you threw the queen's sword, you made his ceremony imperfect. This has slowed down the process and acted as a barrier to keep Bushin from consuming all the souls. However, the barrier is weakening. With this, he fights you, loses, deciding to send his own soul into Bushin to further power him. With that out of the way, there's only one thing left to do. Pull the sword out of the portal and stop the Dark God. Removing the sword unlocks the gate to the last area in the game, the Dimensional World, which is filled with the most horrifically hard normal encounters this game has to offer, so enjoy that. Once inside the Dimensional World, we only have a couple loose ends to wrap up before confronting Bushin. One of them I didn't know was loose, but hey, do you remember the swordsman from the beginning? Well, it turns out he didn't die, and he's here to hit you with a final bombshell. I think he's you? God split his soul into two for some reason? When the flash happens, you're reborn again as a pure entity which is somehow free of the corrupting influence of the bishop? I think it's vague. I want to explain this better, but this is the one and only time the game acknowledges this as a plot point, so it is what it is, I guess. With this, the swordsman really truly disappears because he's positive you got it. And lastly, there's Ledua, who will be waiting for you at the heart of the abyss, also there to confront Bushin. Because she was at the epicenter of the flash, Queen Atelier's spirit is already absorbed into Bushin ages ago. Ledua's plan is to remove Atelier's real soul from the god and use his homunculus, the fake queen, as a new body to house this soul, effectively resurrecting her. However, this fake queen seems to have a little bit of autonomy of her own and thought that Ledua cared for her. She thought the ritual was meant to give her a real life, not turn her into a container for a ghost. At the end, though, it doesn't matter. Bushin and Otelier's souls are already fused too tightly to be separated. After mocking Ledua's hubris, Bushin incinerates the fake queen, who in a final desperate panic tries to run to Ledua to embrace him, seeking some comfort from the pain. However, the magical flames end up engulfing both of them, turning them both into piles of ash. Seemingly pleased with himself having dunked on Ledua's plan, Bushin is finally ready to get on with the business of consuming all of the souls of Duhan, and the only thing standing in the way now is you. This fight is appropriately huge in scale. The size of Bushin is massive, larger than any other boss you'll have encountered in the game. And while some of the optional bosses can outshine this encounter in terms of difficulty, Bushin is no pushover. In fact, I think he'd be nigh unbearable if you haven't built your party trust up enough to make use of some of the better allied actions. But it feels very thematically appropriate that they're so effective here. Your character is the embodiment of a soul that learned the power of having others to lean on. Your trust in your team is your strength now. Your will to protect and work with your team runs directly counter to the mad bishop who tried to decide the fate of everyone on his own. Once defeated, Bushin bursts into a brilliant pillar of light, freeing the souls of those he had consumed. Among them is Otelier's soul. Before departing this world, she thanks you for freeing her. Meanwhile, above the labyrinth, the snow that's blanketed Duhan for so long finally stops. The sun shines on the kingdom again. I don't know if our hero is alive or not at the end of the story. It seems like they might be. There's no telling. The game isn't interested in offering that closure. The souls who were trapped are finally free, floating peaceful up into the sky. And as everyone's souls ascend upward toward whatever awaits them, you can hear Sophia's voice in the wind. The song that was lost to Duhan has been restored. While I was a little annoyed at first, after some reflection, I came out thinking the twist at the end was something I could enjoy. The everyone was dead the whole time thing usually feels a bit like a cop-out, but Tale of the Forsaken Land plays with those themes in some interesting ways. It feels a little like the game is celebrating the endurance of the human spirit, even in times of hopelessness. The souls of the kingdom are still in peril from suffering a cruel fate, whether or not they've died, so at the very least you can provide them with a peaceful respite in their afterlife. Unfortunately, some of that complex human emotion at its core gets buried under a little bit of a forced mystery. There's no logical reason for every character to withhold what they know about you. It's just a tactic that exists solely to keep the player in the dark. When everyone speaks exclusively in riddles, NPC encounters feel stunted. You can feel the hand of the writer pushing down on the scale as they make every clunky conversation in service of protecting the twist at the end. And while it doesn't work in the quiet, world-building way maybe a FromSoft game does, it's still a very interesting core concept. A bunch of souls not knowing they're sitting around basically ripening for a dark god to get ready to eat them, like, that's cool. The other big catch is there's some budget constraints that become pretty obvious here. There are several scenes where they just describe what's happening off screen to you and just hope that your imagination will fill in the blanks. However, in terms of atmosphere, this game really hits it home. Deep in the dungeon, the claustrophobic halls are a night and day comparison to the warm glow and soft chatter of the tavern. And the game is confident enough in its world building not to hit you over the head with characters stating this out loud. While its other contemporaries like Ultima and Rogue were definitely influences on the Japanese RPG scene, none of them seem to get the weird cultural thumbprint that Wizardry did. And if you don't believe me, check out the Crawl's video How Wizardry Influenced Your Favorite Game. That'll definitely cover a lot of stuff. Tale of the Forsaken Land marks the first Japanese Wizardry spin-off in the series to reach English-speaking audiences with an official release. Since Wizardry arrived in Japan, the country has kept the torch burning with a staggering number of exclusive titles. Gaiden, Extus, Empire, Renaissance, and even an MMO. Some reaching us and others not. And that's not even counting the one-to-one spiritual successors like Etrian Odyssey or pretty much any game Experience Incorporated has made. It's an acquired taste, but Japan clearly has an audience for it. Wizardry typically prefers a much more austere approach. Your heroes, even in the case of Tale of the Forsaken Land, are able to die. This gives the journey stakes, but also recontextualizes your relationship to your party. You tend to be more precious and cautious in your exploration, knowing that a bad call, with you as the leader, could result in losing one of your teammates, potentially forever. In this way, gameplay is as much about the ritual of preparing to go on the dangerous quest as it is in going on the quest itself. Mapping out your surroundings through repeat visits is a staple of the series, just like understanding when you shouldn't be taking a risk so you can make sure everyone makes it home alive. You're not approaching a simple dungeon. They're huge, dangerous mazes that reward you for understanding them. Of course, were I to guess, the biggest factor in the lasting legacy of Wizardry overseas would be from how it was localized. One of the series' original creators, Robert Woodhead, went personally to teach ASCIIsoft, the Japanese publisher, how to port the game from the Apple II to their platform, the MSX. But I don't think you need to be a detective to figure out that Mr. Woodhead really likes Japan. I mean, there were little clues. Wizardry has classes like ninjas and samurais, to which he credited the book and miniseries Shogun. But I think most telling is what Robert did after leaving Surtech. He went on to create a localization company called Animigo, which distributed Japanese cinema and anime to the US. Oh, and he married his translator. I think this effectively turned his life into what could only be described as things an anime club guy fever dreams about. Robert Woodhead was one half of the duo that created Wizardry, and then he had the audacity to bring anime like Macross and Bubblegum Crisis to places where I could view them. This is a first for me then, because I have no choice but to present him with this award, the coveted Guy Who Accidentally Shaped the Personality of Cody Award. So big shout out, Mr. Woodhead, please reach out to me for a copy of your plaque, actually that sounds expensive. I'm gonna put it up on screen. Just hit print screen now, okay? And then you can just print that as a screenshot, and that'll be the same thing. I know this is a pain. Thank you for doing this. However, I cannot stress this enough. Do not print this out and put it on your wall if you're not Robert Woodhead. Please, it's not for you, it's for Robert. Tale of the Forsaken Land is the kind of game that requires a very particular sort of patience to enjoy. And that sucks because it's very easy to point out what a game does poorly in a technical sense, but when it has something ethereal like this one, it's a lot more work to describe, but I'm gonna try my best. Tales of the Forsaken Land is obviously on a budget. It's a visual medium and the writing is competent, but you're still playing a game at the end of the day. It's set apart by its ability to have you interact with it. I got some flashbacks of Xenogears Disc 2 with the whole just telling me what happens thing. The world building here though, it can pull you in. I notice this is a running theme for me. I can forgive a lot if you create an atmosphere that I want to escape to. To be fair, I don't want to live in this world, but I do want to challenge its depths. The deeper you go into the dungeon, the more oppressive the whole affair feels. Not just in the sense of harder encounters, of which there are many. Some floors, while not visually stunning, really soaked in the feeling that they were going for, which is a shame because that was often interrupted by the insanely high encounter rate. I think more than most games that I've covered on this channel, this one is not for everyone. And honestly, that's not a bad thing. Not every game is made for every person, but if you are a lot like me, if you do hang with a good dungeon crawl, I think you might be inclined to side with me on calling this a dark fantasy classic. Well, that's it. I'm gonna stop making promises about when the next video comes out, I guess. This is a really, fun thing to do, make these videos, so I want to keep doing it. And I want to take a moment to do the normal shilling that makes my tummy hurt a little. Can you comment, subscribe? Can you gently tap the bell button as delicately as you possibly can? Never smash it. Please don't. Most importantly though, I do want to thank my patrons. Now, I didn't promise that I would read their names out under any circumstances, but it feels really good to do sometimes, so here they are. Lunch Lady 420, Silvar, Al Baron, The Kojiro, Brendan Bigley, Old Zool, Averybot, Dion G, and The Cold One. Thank you all for your support. It is really overwhelming and awesome, and I did a horse noise. That's how much gratitude I have. I'm that lost for words. I have content on my Patreon if you would like to join these brave few, and I'm in the process of revamping some of the tiers to make it make a little more sense. Seriously though, thank you, patrons. But thank you sincerely to anyone who watched. You folks are great too. I hope to be back with a new game to yap about soon. So soon. But who knows? Maybe not 9 to 12 months? I don't know. Bye.